Welcome to the Kentucky Line. I'm Matt.
And I'm Clifton. So coming to you tonight after uh, really the decision that Kentucky's been waiting on for months now, it seems, and that's Tyron Stokes, and it kind of uh, ends up picking Kansas, which seems like a decision that a lot of people saw coming for a long time now. But unfortunately, Matt, it seems like the only one that didn't see that decision coming was this coaching staff. And unfortunately, that means that you're now late in the transfer portal cycle, and it's the options that are out there are slim to none in order to finish out a roster that has still some glaring holes. So, just what's your kind of initial thoughts? As we just kind of record us a quick episode here tonight.
We with the portal the way it is passing up. We passed up on a lot of guys
Mm-hmm.
and holding out for Stokes. We had basically a roster spot set aside for him, and what unfortunately we weren't able to get. We let a lot of players go
Mm-hmm.
because we were waiting and here I don't really know what to make of it all, other than we had talked a little earlier. I think that if you really believe you have a shot at Stokes, then I understand waiting because he can be a real difference maker, and
Mm-hmm.
so I understand that. My only issue is it seemed like every national pundit, every recruiting site, everyone was basically saying he's leaning towards Kansas.
Yeah.
So I guess my only question was, what? Why did our staff believe so heavily that we had a chance? Because honestly, now that it's looking back on it, I don't think we had much of a chance at all.
No. And so you can go and read on KSR on the website their reporters, uh, Jack Pilgrim and Jacob Polachek, they've put out a story tonight that some people are upset about, but I understand their reasoning for putting it out. Essentially, what they were able to confirm today is something they initially heard, a couple weeks ago when Stokes was on his visit, and that was that Stokes has already put in his paperwork, some of the financial paperwork for rev share for Kansas. And so I think some people online are complaining, well, why didn't you put that out then? And so people's hopes wouldn't be up. And what they're saying is, well, they only heard that from one source. It didn't get confirmed by a second source until today, around the time the decision was made. But also, though that type of paperwork isn't a letter of intent, so he could have signed that with multiple schools, just preparing the business side of things. And they had put in a call to the coaching staff. I'm sure probably not directly to Pope, but they didn't get anything back. And there were kind of several reporters were saying that was the case with them as well. So ultimately, we have a staff that they're not aware of the market, and they're not talking to the media who knows what everybody else is doing. So you learn the market that way, and also you've chosen not to take a general manager, and so ultimately you have two ways to get information outside of just the one person that is Mark Pope, and Kentucky's really not utilizing any of those. And so to me, honestly, Matt, and I don't like to be doom and gloom or anything, but this feels like the low point so far for Mark Pope's time at Kentucky, and it's not because I think Stokes is just a world beater, all time great recruit. That's not the case. He is the number one recruit in the country. I don't know, how that 1 year compares to another. Most people will tell you the 27 class or 26 class, excuse me, that he's the number one recruit in is down, much different than what we just saw this past year. But this is just to me the kind of the end of the road as far as the struggles that Kentucky's had recruiting. This now makes 2 full recruiting cycles where we've not got an elite recruit. I know we got Jasper Johnson and Marino, and you have to add the caveat they were from Kentucky, but they still were not top even 20 players in the country. And you missed on guys when you had an unlimited budget last year, and this year essentially you have no high school recruits outside of hiring one a top 150 kid that's kind of a project, probably depth point guard at best, and you hired his dad as an assistant coach. So to me, it just shows we have real problems recruiting, and it's something that Pope's going to have to figure out moving forward.
Yeah, listen, it's the whole recruiting situation is disheartening because honestly, uh, when you don't get a high school recruit, essentially, uh, essentially no high school recruits, that's to me a glaring issue.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've heard reports that we could have had a couple of big time recruits in this class, but uh, we were holding out for Stokes,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know if I believe that per se, because it seems like when things like that happen, people like to pile on, and it's like,
That's true.
well, yeah, y'all could have had these two guys, but, um, and so I don't know if I buy that 100%, but I mean, if there's any truth to that, then it just makes you kind of scratch your head because why are we putting all of our eggs in the Tyron Stokes basket? And like I said, I'm fine with waiting.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand why if it was a legit chance, but man, just every indicator just made it seem like he just wasn't coming here. And so
Yeah.
I don't know and listen, we don't have the privilege and we don't know
No.
what's happening behind the scenes. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes at Kansas or Kentucky. So it's not like Bill Self's out there telling everybody what's going on either. So I think Pope sometimes gets a little bit of uh, uh, some criticism that's like, well, why isn't he telling us his every move? Well, I don't know that anybody is, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But now I do think it's weird that he hasn't talked to made basically any statement since the end of the season. But nevertheless, the problem is what is the disconnect with here? And I don't know. I don't know the answer.
No, I don't either. And it's will we ever know? We don't know. But what we do know is that we're going into a critical season where right now essentially you have 6 players that are serviceable on a quality roster, and I think you're still missing what should be your number one player.
Yeah.
There's a clear hole there where to me you have 4 guys outside of Marino. I think Marino's a quality starter, but I think you take any of those other guys, and there were people out there probably better than them. Maybe with outside of not Wilkins, but all those could be 6 men. I don't know if you want all of those to be starting. I think you want somebody to come in and have some star power. And ultimately, the problem with Stokes, and you touched on it. There's reports that we probably missed on portal guys and high school recruits waiting on him because 1, he takes up a roster spot. 2, he takes up a lot of money, and 3, there's people didn't want to play with him. But the money is what's the bigger deal to me, is because if you have a budget this year and Stokes went to Kansas for both reports I saw today said over $7 million, the highest paid recruit ever in college basketball so far. And every indication that I've saw says that Kentucky offered more than that. So I'm just going to estimate $8 million. That's 2 top end transfers there that essentially you decided to pass on, waiting on this guy. And for whatever reason, you're waiting on him when the whole world's telling you he's not coming. But some reason you thought he was, and you hit on it. We have to figure out why that's the case. Why did Mark Pope think Stokes was a Wildcat when no one else on the planet did?
Right, and I think that that's kind of the question, and honestly, that's the I think the problem with the whole thing, because that's where the criticism can come in. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can criticize if you know. But the problem is we weren't. It kept us from getting other players. So now, when at some point, uh, w- you have to make a decision, and now we're seriously behind the eight ball,
Yeah,
and the only, I guess, uh, you know, bright spot with the whole thing is we've got plenty of money now to
yeah,
go get some people.
yeah.
And so if there whoever out there that you know that's a real player, I don't even know, and honestly, I don't even know who it is, but uh,
To me, there's three guys, and the one I wanted from the get go, and I told you this the last episode. If it was me, I would have cut ties with Tyron Stokes, a week and a half ago, after it was clear you had no momentum after the visit, and I would have went all in on the guy from Iowa State.
yeah,
But here's the problem now: you have signed in the last week now two power forwards who
yep,
are decent, but I don't know if what you paid them, if you can afford now to go out and give someone else to bump both those guys down a spot. Because this guy's a clear four from Iowa State, Mimonovich. And, they're saying Njai is a starter. They paid him starter money. And there was talks for a while that McBride from, James Madison, who signed today, and I want to talk about that in a second. But they paid him pretty good, and they, for a while, thought he could be a starter. And that's great if you have two pieces you feel like could start at the four. But I don't know if anybody's saying, yeah, those guys are going to lead us to a second weekend or let alone the Final Four. And for Pope, that's what's needed. You need to have a contender this year. Just matching last year really is not going to be good enough. And right now, I don't know if they have, just between me and you, I don't know if they have a roster to even match that. I hope I'm wrong. But it's just, I don't know. I don't know who you go out and get. Beyond that, you have Yusufu from Baylor, who today pretty much said, "I'm planning on staying in the draft." He is a three man and would be the perfect fit. Do you offer him enough money to come out? I mean, that's possible. Do you just overpay? And the only other one who Kentucky's really had no traction with so far, I think I've heard Tennessee, maybe North Carolina State, a couple other teams. But Juke, I think it's Juke Harris from Wake Forest, really good player. Some people have him the number one player in the transfer portal. He is kind of could play 1 through 3 in Pope's system. You could put him in there and have three guards. That would be great. But for any of those, you're going to have to go in and probably overpay their value to get in on a recruitment this late now.
yeah, because now they can smell the desperation
Yeah.
on us. That's the thing, and their agents
Yeah.
can smell the that's the thing. These players aren't going to be doing the negotiating. It's going to be their agents, and their agents know exactly the desperation that Kentucky's in. So we're going to have to go out and overpay, and if the kid from Baylor, because we've got to have a three.
Yeah.
We need a real stud at the three, and uh, and so I don't know who there is other than the kid from Baylor. But if he goes into the draft,
There is
um,
nobody.
I'm not sure what you do. And now I don't want to take away from uh, Cam Williams,
No.
because I really do think one thing that I think that people, we, you know, is Cam Williams was really starting to play well last year,
Yeah.
and I mean I could see him starting at the three this year.
Yeah.
Now do I see him being a star? Well, no, not necessarily. Um, but if our guards are as good as we think that they could be, we don't have to have a star at the three.
Right.
We and then our highest recruit was Braden Hawthorne. I mean, he was a top 40 recruit,
Yeah.
and maybe he's going to be pretty good this year. I
Right.
don't know, but um, and maybe he can play some three as well. Uh, but we've got so I think that our roster. Honestly, I personally think our roster is going to be better than what people think it is.
I hope so.
But I still believe we have to get that three spot
Yeah.
uh, worked out. I mean, it sounds like we've got two guys for the four, um, for the four spot
Mm-hmm.
now. So I think the guy from Iowa State is a long shot at this point. Um,
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I would love to have him. To me, he's built for Pope's system, but unless they feel like Njai can bump down and play the the three, or they're going to use him kind of as a backup at 3, 4, and 5. I just can't see him spending the money when you already have
yeah,
players like that. But he plays
and
along the wing.
maybe he could play some three. But he's kind of a perimeter guy.
Yeah,
I don't really know enough about it. Like I mean, enough about his game to know, but uh, who knows?
no,
Maybe they think they can work it out. But the bottom line is we've got to go get a
yeah,
couple of legit players.
yeah.
I don't
You,
know
I
how
mean,
we're going
you
to do
have
it.
to have one, and like you said, you need to. I still think this team needs some shooting and some depth at the depth at guard. That
Yeah,
I think both your guards you have probably high hopes for, but I don't know if any of those or if either of them are a sure thing. And I think you probably want that contrast to where maybe not a super high ceiling, but you have a high floor to say, hey, if nothing else, this guy's going to come in and knock down shots. And I think that's something this team is missing right now, just on paper. But I don't know.
yeah,
I'm just kind of at a loss right now. But let's not glaze over. We do have a commit today in McBride, and I just hate it for that kid just because he's a quality player, averaged nearly 15 points a game at James Madison. James Madison's has had a good athletics program the last couple of years. And, you've seen them have some success in football and basketball. They've hired kind of innovative coaches, and he's thrived. He's a four man who I think will do well in Pope's system, especially as a backup. He shoots almost 40% from three, 6'9". So I think he's a quality piece.
he's a pretty big body too,
Yeah,
isn't he? Isn't he like a kind of a
yeah. I think like two
bigger kid?
forty.
Yeah.
A
So I
big
mean,
kid.
I think he could be, you know, he's one of these guys that I feel like can be a, a surprise.
Hmm.
Kind of come out and surprise us at how well he plays.
Yeah, I think you look at him almost like I don't know. The role is going to be like Ainsley Almanor, but I think he's a lot more talented than Almanor was. But
Yeah.
I think he's going to play that perfectly. But I think my problem with it was just the timing. Like it was clear that kid committed like 2 or 3 days ago, and Kentucky was just pretty much waiting to decide if they were going to take his commitment the way depending on how things unfolded. And so I'm sure like 15 minutes before Stokes was scheduled to commit, you get this notification, hey, McBride's committed. Most people probably knew that meant Stokes wasn't going to. But also, man, it's just nobody cares at that point. Everybody's waiting on Stokes. And then when you don't get him, McBride's completely glossed over. So you're really taking a moment from a kid when you could have done this, 3 days ago. And Justin McBride being on the roster is not going to scare off Tyron Stokes if you really
Well,
thought
yeah,
you had a chance.
that's the thing. I don't really understand that whole why if he's committed and we've got him, why hold off on announcing it? Is I mean, it's not like he's going to be taking Stokes' spot. So I mean,
Unless they just
yeah,
had to reconvince him once Njai, you know, committed, then that's possible. But if that's the case, just let him wait and let him announce tomorrow after the Stokes stuff has had 12 hours to kind of die down a little.
yeah, because I mean, Pope is getting absolutely Pope and the staff is getting just absolutely hammered by the national media right now. I
Well,
mean,
and it just
Kentucky,
feels like we're everybody's pawn.
uh, Kentucky is. I mean, Kentucky is kind of a laughing stock right now. And I don't, and I hate. And the thing about it is, I've tried to be on the positive side in a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
things, and but kind of like I said from the beginning of all this, my issue really wasn't even this past season. I My biggest concern was the future because I knew what our recruiting situation was, and now it's just even more of a concern because you know we're in the situation we're in now, and uh, it's funny how people like he's on the hot seat because we had such a bad season last year. Well, I don't really have that take. I mean, but it was obviously not what we wanted. But it was also a lot of things that were out of, you know, had some bad fortune too. But
You
it
did.
doesn't really matter. That that was last season. Now we're in a situation where we're basically having to beg people to come, and that's just not what Kentucky fans are used to, and don't really want to have to tolerate it. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I was while you were saying that, I was looking up a couple tweets here from Kyle Tucker that I saw earlier. So he's now a national college basketball writer. Covered Kentucky for a long time. Has stepped away from that beat, but now he's back with 247 Sports, and he's kind of doing national stories, but still kind of Kentucky focused a lot of times. Still kind of, I think, lives in the area, probably in Nashville. But this was fascinating. Let me go back and find. Oh wait, yeah, right here it is. Since October, Kentucky has had visits scheduled with players ranked number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 16, 17, 18, 25, 27, and 28, and got none of them.
Yeah,
And then he goes on to say, let's see, right here, he says, and just to bottom line it, Kentucky's not comporting itself, I don't know if that's a typo, but as a top program in college basketball under Pope. It just isn't. Zero lottery pick level high school recruit signed, one top 15 transfer who had a torn ACL signed in 3 total cycles. And so ultimately, I think that's it. To me, while last year was a disappointment, and like you said, there were injuries. Last year there were some circumstances beyond Pope's control. I think some of them were things he could control. I think the narrative at times, I think, you put a lot of money into Jaden Quainance. Was that smart with a guy coming off an ACL? How did you handle depth at, key positions? I think all those are legitimate gripes, but what's going to make this a make or break situation now for Pope is, you know, everybody's fear was that Pope wasn't a good enough recruiter to really handle the job. And over the last year, it seemed like that's true. So it's
yeah,
up to him 1 year from now. Not only do you have to win on the court, but you have to prove that you can change that narrative and get out of front. And I think 27, you have to start early, and you have to prove that you can recruit. If not, a year from now, we're probably, hopefully, already have completed a coaching search. But I hope Pope turns it around. I hope next year's great. I hope we exceed everyone's expectations. But there's work to be done.
yeah. I mean, that's true. And the fact of the matter is, um, things are going to have to get better on the recruiting front, and also with a new athletic director coming in, Pope's leash is going to be a whole lot shorter than it even would have been
Yeah.
with Barnhart. So, and that's just the fact of the matter. So,
And if
what's
Billy
it?
Donovan's still available, it's going to be even shorter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. Especially if he has any interest.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, I mean, I'm just going to have to hope they can figure something out over the next little bit and find a couple players.
Yep. Well, we'll be back to talk about it whenever they do, whoever it is. They're going to need more players, more bodies, regardless. But we'll plan on being back, about a week from now. And if there's a big recruit or a big development between them, we'll pop in for a quick episode like tonight. And if unless you got anything else, I think that's about it. What about you?
Oh, I'm good, man.
All right, go Cats.
Go Cats.